We'll start that recording now. There we go. So our plan for this webinar is to learn about applications of sensors in the real world. So we're going to contextualize it, collect and analyze live data with the microbit. And we're also going to do the same with a remote microbit. So we'll do so with one microbit, and then I'll show you how you can connect to a second microbit. And then we're going to check out applications with code to analyze data. So we're going to write code that will analyze the data. And of course, we will be connecting to curriculum expectations throughout the webinar. There we go. So I'm going to share a few articles with you in which sensors are the focus. So in this webinar, we'll be leveraging the microbit's built-in sensors to collect data from our surrounding environment. And as part of the grades 1 to 8 science and technology curriculum, as well as the grade 9 science curriculum in Ontario, as I'm sure you are aware, students are expected to build their awareness and understanding of emerging technology. So sensors is one form of emerging technology. More and more are constantly being developed, and we can pair them with things like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, big data. So those are some of the themes for emerging technologies. Drones, there's so many that you can be connecting to with your students. But for these articles I'm sharing are all connected with sensors. So I feel like these provide students with real world, or they do provide students with real world connections. And it also shows them that they're used in every industry. So I will share the links to all of these articles in the document at the end. And in fact, every link, as I mentioned, will be shared with you, and screen print of code as well. So for this article here, it discusses a sensor that monitors sweat rates at different body locations, and it was developed at Penn State University. So there are already sensors out there that can help track the liquid sweat that most of us think of when we imagine sweating. So the sweat that we produce when we're exercising or in super hot weather, and that's called sensible sweat. So sensible sweat, there are already sensors that can collect data about that. And those sensors will help us with find out information about the person's skin, their nervous system, and certain health conditions as well. But this particular sensor is developed to detect something called insensible sweat. So insensible sweat is in the form of vapor. So it's secreted at a much lower rate than, and it's secreted during like rest or light exercise. So the person doesn't even really notice this. But this has been proven to be difficult to connect or to collect through sensors in the past. And so this new sensor has the potential to collect data from insensible sweat, and it will help us with evaluating skin diseases such as eczema, wound healing, pain, and anxiety. So it's pretty exciting. And there are also, you can see on the side there, other sensors that they talk about on that particular website. So again, I'll share that link with you a little bit later on. So this one here, this article refers to a report that looks at the global smart highway market. So this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and this particular report provides a forecast up to what we should expect up to 2027. So smart highways incorporate a lot of sensors. They incorporate all kinds of emerging technologies, and that helps with traffic flow. So things like emerging technologies such as AI, big data, IoT, along with sensors such as like sound sensors, speed sensors. These super highways or smart highways also incorporate solar panels so that they're able to actually generate the power to run. They incorporate cameras and digital signage. So some of that information can actually be shared with autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles. So for example, if the temperature is below a certain amount and they're coming to a bridge, they might warn the car to slow down because it's icy. So that is important, but also it helps with, as I mentioned, traffic flow. And that data is provided in real time. So it can help with parking, and it reduces overall travel time. Therefore, it also minimizes pollution levels in the environment. So for this particular article, it discusses the use of something called digital twin technology. So what that is it's creating a digital model of an environment. So this particular model is of a wind farm that's being built. So it hasn't been built yet, but it's starting to be built. And they have sensors that take information above and below sea level all around the wind farm. The digital model can help researchers to not only understand the environmental factors, but also to come up with renewable energy solutions. So currently, companies tend to collect data for this sort of thing manually, but with this technology, they're automating the process. So they can collect data to monitor the impact of the turbines before, during, and after they're built. They can collect information about aquatic life, reefs, and bird life. They can build predictive models as well about the potential impact of changes in the environment. But what I thought was that one application of this particular system is that perhaps they can use sensors once, because it's live data, right, to identify a flock of birds that's heading towards a wind turbine. And if they have this live data, they can stop the turbine so that the birds can pass through. So much potential there as well with the digital twin technologies. So I've got two more here. So this one here is talking about a company that created a product called Sensor Zone. And this is a proximity warning system. So it uses proximity sensors, so it can tell how close or far things are. And it will alert both the operator of heavy machinery and the worker with vibrations, an alarm, flashing lights, anything to let them know that they're potentially close to either hurting someone, harming someone, or that person is about to be harmed, or they could be harmed if they're nearby the machinery. So the worker will be alerted if the moving machinery is nearby, and the operator will be alerted if they're really close to a worker. So not only do they have these sensors to alert people, but because they have the sensors, they're able to collect data to be aware of when these situations are happening, so they can better plan out their days to avoid such potentially dangerous situations. And finally, there's a really good video that goes with this link that I suggest you check out. So a beauty company partnered with a company that creates this, you might have seen this, the stabilizing spoon. It helps people with tremors to eat. So what they found is users of that spoon who had tremors and were able to have success eating with that spoon, they would love technology, similar technology, to help them with other tasks. One of those tasks being to apply makeup. So their prototype has helped people with tremors or Parkinson's apply makeup, and it might be in the market within a year and a half or so. So this sort of accessible technology uses sensors to detect the shape of people's faces. They have a lipstick as well as an eyebrow application device so far, and it's called the Brow Magic, the eyebrow device, and it uses an optical sensor as well as a pressure sensor, so it knows how hard to press when they're applying the eyebrow. And there's, as I said, there's an excellent video that you might want to check out. The company believes that the future of beauty, and beauty tech as they're calling it, is at the intersection of science, tech, and creativity. So that's what they say in the article. Again, I would definitely check out that video when you get access to the article. So after, giving your students an opportunity to research or connect with all different types of sensors, I wanted to mention those articles were all from the last week or so. So all of those articles were published in the last couple of weeks at the most. So you can imagine there are tons and tons of articles out there. So perhaps you can assign students to an industry or a particular group of sensors, and then they can do maybe a jigsaw, or they can share with one another about, perhaps connecting to an industry that they're most interested in. So there's just so much that you can share to connect to that expectation in Strand A related to emerging technologies. So once you've kind of contextualized and provided students with an opportunity to learn about why we're using sensors, and that sensors are used everywhere, maybe you can introduce them to the microbit and go ahead and learn about the built-in sensors. So there are lots of sensors that you can attach to the microbit with the input-output devices on the bottom there, but it does have some built-in sensors. So It has a temperature sensor, a light sensor. We've got an accelerometer sensor, a compass, and it also has, if you have the V2, a sound sensor as well. So I did mention that this webinar will support learning with both the V1 and the V2. Just a quick note, if you have the V1, you'll know because it's flat on the bottom versus the V2, you can see that it's got the ridges on the bottom. So that's the easiest way to tell the difference between a V1 and V2. But this particular webinar will focus on learning for both the V1 and the V2, unless we're using the sound sensor, because only the V2 has a sound sensor. So we're going to be starting off with collecting live data with 1 microbit. So I'll be doing so live for you for this webinar. So we'll start with 1 microbit, as I mentioned, and then we'll add the second one later. If you'd like to code along with us, you're welcome to. It might be easier to just kind of take notes of which applications you like, and then you can rewatch this webinar. It will be posted at some point over the next week or so on the OECM website. But I will suggest, or I will say that if you would like this to work with your microbit for live data, use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge. I've used other browsers or had participants in professional development sessions use other browsers, and it doesn't necessarily connect to the microbit. And you need to be connected to the microbit in that new way. For those of you who used it a few years ago, where you could drag and drop a file, you have to be able to connect to the microbit, like pair it, so that you can just click the download button and the code goes directly onto the microbit. So keep that in mind. Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge should work for you. So the first example I'm going to do is to incorporate the light sensor. I'm going to do this live for you, but you can see, kind of see the code there that we're going to be using. So we're going to be collecting light data. So you can imagine there are many different strands in the grades 1 to 9 expectations that you can take a look at. So in grade 4, obvious, it's light and sound. There's a strand called light and sound, so we can connect to that. In grade 7, interactions in the environment. We take a look at abiotic factors in an ecosystem, light being one of those. And then in grade 8, systems in action. Anything we're doing today, any coding with the microbit applies perfectly to systems in action in grade 8. So there's industries who use you just saw all those examples. All of those are systems that have been created to incorporate coding or sensors. So systems in action. And then finally, in grade 8, obviously there are other strands, but here are just a few that came to mind. In grade 8 mathematics, our students are expected to analyze data through code. And so because we're collecting data, we're going to analyze it in an Excel spreadsheet. And later on, I'll show you how you can analyze it with actual code. That's another connection that works really well. So I'm going to go ahead and do this live with you right now. So once you go to makecode.com, you'll just select that microbit. And then I'm going to click on New Project. You can see all of the projects that I've been working on and that I practiced for this webinar. I'm going to click on New Project, and I'll call this Light Data 1 Microbit. You can call it whatever you'd like, though, of course. I'm going to make my code bigger by clicking on the bottom right-hand side. There we go. Now I don't need the on start block, so I'm going to get rid of this. If you want an introductory session for MakeCode, then you might want to check out the beginner microbit session that we did, and that's posted on the OECM website, or will be soon. So I'm just going to get rid of that on start block by putting it in the trash can, and I'm going to work with the forever block now. I like to use that under LED, I'm going to grab the toggle block, because what that does is it flashes a little dot on the microbit, and you can make it so it flashes it every time you take in data. So right now it's flashing a lot because it's in a forever loop. But if I put a pause in there, so if I go under basic and I grab a pause block, and if I change that, let's say we collect light level every 1 second, you'll see that it will start to blink every 1 second versus like all the time. So the 0, 0 just means it's appearing on the top left-hand corner. So it's actually a 5x5 grid. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can even see when I hold my mouse over there. There we go. It says the coordinate 0, 0. So the bottom right then is 4, 4. So I'm going to make it so it appears 4, 4, just kind of like on a device. That's usually what happens, the little dots on the bottom right. So you'll see the dots start to appear on the bottom right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look in the advanced drawer because this is an advanced webinar. So I'm going to click on advanced and I'm going to click on serial. So this is where you can write data to your computer from the microbit. So it actually is similar on other devices as well. So whenever you're serial writing something or reading something, you're, in this case, we're writing it data to our computer. So I'm going to grab the serial write value block and I'm going to snap it into place. So serial write data block and snap that into place. I'm then going to, because I'm going to be collecting light information, I'm going to type in light there. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to go to input and I'm going to grab the light level and snap that into place. So now I've got the toggle. Every 1 second, it's going to be collecting data, collecting information, and it's going to do this ongoing for as long as we want it to. Now, if I were going to collect information all day long, then what I probably would do is change that to maybe every 5 minutes or something like that. But because I want to show you the live data, I'm going to do it every second. And you can even do it all the time, constantly, which would work well for like something like sound, because you don't want a break in between where it's collecting the sound data because you might miss some of the sound. So let's now upload this onto my microbit. So I'm going to plug in my microbit into my computer with the USB cord. So I always use, whenever I'm presenting in front of the class or a professional development session or a virtual session, I always just grab a longer cord so that I'm not like having to reach down to my computer. So that's kind of like a tip for doing presentations. So then on the bottom left, I'm going to connect to my microbit. So I'm going to click on connect device. In the other webinars, I go through that a little bit more carefully, but I'm going to click on next, and then select the BBC microbit to connect to this microbit, and then I'll click on connect. And in a second, it should connect. Sometimes I have to do it a few times to make sure it's working. And I can tell that it's connected because it stopped flashing on the back, or it stopped flashing on the actual MakeCode application. I'm then going to click on download, and that will automatically put the code that's on my screen onto the microbit. Okay, so I can now see that on the bottom right-hand side of my microbit, the little dot is flashing. So it's started to collect data. Where's that data going? Well, you might have noticed that on my screen now, we see this thing called Show Data Device. So if I click on Show Data Device, you will see all of the live data coming in. So I've got 0, 0, and I'm going to hold it near a light. And you can see the data, the light is getting higher. And this is live data. So I'm moving my microbit around the room. It's a little dark in here. And it kind of depends. It's the ambient light. So it's the light directly facing the LEDs. So if I hold this kind of close to my light, if I hold it to my computer, it's a little bit different numbers. Let's give some light. Sometimes I get, like when I'm just testing this out, I'll flash my phone. I'll get students or teachers to flash their phone light on it, but you can see I'm collecting live data. You also will have noticed that there is a graph here, and it adjusts the axes based on the greatest amount what is on your screen. So in a second, it will like lower that scale for you, just so that it's more like provides a better visual for students. But now I've made it go higher again. So you can see the maximum value on the scale there. Pretty cool. Okay, but it gets a little bit cooler. We can actually download this data now and explore it in Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to pause it. And I'm going to click on export data. So again, you can imagine collecting all of this data all day long. Students can leave their microbit in certain locations around the school to collect information about light data. So I'm going to store this into my folder here. I'm going to call it light during webinar. And then I'm going to open it. Now I'm going to open this onto Microsoft Excel. However, you can open this in Google Sheets or whatever spreadsheet software you'd like, because it is a .csv file. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to just make that a little bigger so you can see it. You can see that it's time stamped and it's about every second that it's recording the light level. So those are all the light levels that we collected. And just for fun, I'll just show you how quickly you can generate a graph with this data so you can further analyze it. So I'm going to highlight the two columns. I find it easier when you just highlight the top A and B, so the header column headers. And then I'm going to go to Insert, and then I'm going to do a scatter plot so that time is on the x-axis and light is on the y-axis. So I'm going to select a scatter plot. So there you go. You see all of the data on a graph generated very quickly. And just because I have to have my axes labeled, it's always important. So I'm going to do light level. Now, a lot of people will ask, what is the units for light level? What are the units rather? And it's relative. It's a relative value when you're working with the microbit. It goes from 0, so no light at all, or that it detects, because it's not a perfect light sensor, all the way up to 255. So there are 256 values that it could have. So if it's dark, it'd be closer to 0. If it's bright, it'll be closer to 255. So you can use that to compare information about light data being collected. So on my bottom axis, I'll call that time, and my units will be in seconds. Now on my scale here, I've gone up to nearly 80 seconds, but you could do this for all day. And then you can just make your spreadsheet smaller and then spread it out so you'll be able to see more details on your graph. For my title, I'll call it light level during webinar. And then we can play around, make our graph a little bit cooler. But again, just so quick to generate a graph, and then you can really check to see what's happening with the light level during this webinar, or the light level around your school. So you can collect data about the light level in different parts of your classroom. Where do you want to plant a seed? Because once that germinates, you need to have some light for photosynthesis to occur. And it could be for various purposes. I'm sure you can come up with some sort of investigations that you can conduct using light level. So I'm just going to go back to my microbit to MakeCode right now. I'm going to click on back. Now that was for light level. I can very quickly change that to take in temperature. So let's say I do that right now. I will then go to input and grab my temperature block, get rid of the light level block, and then I can download. Don't forget, you have to download the code back onto your microbit, but I just have to click download now. It's already connected. So it just takes a second. And now you can see the temperature in here. So I can make that go a little bit warmer. So the temperature sensor is on the processor on the back of the microbit. So if I blow on that to heat it up a little bit, you can see the temperature change. Again, some live data. If I go back, I might want to change that to a sound block. So sound level was only on the V2. So I happen to have a V2 here. So that's why I'm testing it. Oops, I guess I should also change that to sound. Hold on. So it'll be labeled properly when I check out the data. So I'm going to download that again. And now we're going to be checking out some sound data. You can make that go away just by disconnecting and connecting again. And we could also collect sound data or temperature data at the same time. So if I clap, you can see the data. Oh, I noticed something. We want to get rid of that pause block because if you notice, if I clap, it's not getting every clap because it's only collecting the data every second. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to get rid of my pause block and just delete that. So that's kind of a common error that students will do. They'll be like, it's not showing me when I clap what's going on. So now we'll download that data again onto our microbit. I see a question about sound being between 0 and 255. Yes, it is, Greg. It's between 0 and 255. And I read something in the chat there just now, but I just got rid of it. There we go. You can compare the light level. I'll just turn that on so you can see me talking. You can compare for sure the light level to an actual light meter as David suggests, and then you would be able to know, what is 255 according to the microbit. So for sure, I think that would be a really good idea. So if I clap, You can see when I'm quiet. There we go. So it's great to collect sound data as well. All right, finally, I'm going to change this now to collect acceleration data. So I'll just bring you to my slides for a second. So just a reminder, when we collected the data, I just clicked on this export data button. And there's the spreadsheet. So for sound level, you'll get screen prints of all the code. So if you want to do the sound, you can check it out. Again, connects perfectly to grade 4 light and sound, but also in grade 6 space. So in the space unit, there's a big expectation related to astronauts' kind of living conditions, what's safe and what's not. So even the conditions on flights. So sound is a big factor. How can they adjust the sound to ensure it doesn't damage astronauts' ears, or how can they protect the astronauts' ears? So they need to collect sound data to see just how loud that sound is. Okay, and then temperature data. There we go. Temperature data. So again, it works really well with a number of strands. However, I see a really nice connection here to grade 5. So maybe you're considering optimal conditions for learning, for example, because we know too low conditions makes our body start to use physiological responses to focus on other things. So it's harder for students to focus on their learning if they're too cold, or what we see more of in the summertime when we don't have air conditioning in classrooms is it gets too hot. And so there are certain optimal conditions for learning. Grade 6, again, looking at that expectation where we're analyzing the impact that conditions in space have on humans engaged in space exploration. That's a direct quote from that expectation, and considering their physiological needs in space. In grade 7, when we're looking at temperature, heat in the environment is an obvious one. And then we've also got obviously grade 8 math, looking at all of that data, that beautiful data, and that we've collected during that when we were collecting live data. Okay, and I know you might be wondering, okay, but we're stuck to our computer at this point still. So in a second, we'll do where we're not stuck to our computer, we'll collect data from a remote microbit. So now what I'd like to demonstrate, though, one more time with just one microbit, is looking at vibrations. So in this case, we're looking at acceleration. So when we shake the microbit, we'll be able to notice. So again, because it's vibrations, I'm going to demonstrate something where I'm going to play music on my speaker, and you're going to see the vibrations. So sound waves, as you know, consist of vibrating particles. So if you have music, for instance, playing on a speaker, the particles and the materials around the speaker might also vibrate, or even right next to the speaker. So I'll put my microbit on top of my speaker, which will be vibrating because sound waves consist of vibrating particles. And then you'll see that on my screen. So it really drives home, like, yes, we can use the sound sensor, which changes the sound data to an electrical signal, but by using the actual acceleration accelerator sensor, we can then see that sound waves do have vibrating particles. I think that kind of drives the point home for those grade 4s. Also, we can consider forces acting on structures. Maybe we can have a microbit inside of a helmet to see what sort of force the head would be experiencing, and the microbit can record that data for you. Same with form, function, and design of structures in grade 7. So think about earthquakes. In grade 8, systems in action. Again, anything works for that. But like in industry, machines produce quite a bit of vibrations, and that's actually something that's kind of limiting sometimes. So they have to consider how they can reduce the vibrations, or if those vibrations are going to harm like the building around the machine. So that's something to consider. Again, flight in space. So I'm sure you might have heard about, when astronauts go into space, the machine or the space shuttle is shaking so much that it could even knock them out if they experience too much of a G-force. So there's something else to explore with your accelerometers, and then grade 8 mathematics, of course. So let's take a look now at what we can do with our speakers. So I'm going to play some music for you, and we'll check out what that looks like. So I'll start a new program here. I probably should close my other one. All right. I could have just altered my other one, I suppose, but we'll just do that quickly. So I'm going to make my code a little bit bigger. I'm going to get rid of my on start block, and I've got my forever block. I'm going to once again use that toggle block. Now I'll put it at 4:4 so that it's the lights on the bottom right, the LED on the bottom right is lit up. And then we'll serial write that value. I always think of like Rice Krispies when I say that. So we're going to click on serial write value block. So I've had most success with this block. So you could use serial write number. Maybe you want to, but the best one I found has always worked for me is serial write value. So I'm going to do vibrations. Okay. And under input, I'm going to use the acceleration sensor now. So I'm going to snap that into place. So you'll notice that we can collect data from the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. So you could collect all three and take and compare all three. And then that way students can figure out, you know, which way is X with their microbit, which way is Y, and then which way is Z. It just depends how you're holding it too. But Z would be like, if I had my microbit like this, that's the Z axis, but students can play around with that and they'll see the different values. But we're going to do where it kind of combines all of those into one. So it's called strength. So we're going to look at the vibration strength for this. I'm going to download this. So I'm not including a pause block because acceleration takes into account speed and time. So if we put in a pause block in there, it will totally mess up our data, especially because time is so important for acceleration. So I'm going to download this data onto my microbit. I think I'm connected. Oh, I got to do that again. All right. Okay, so if that happens, it's because I was in a different one. So I'm just going to click on that little X. Okay, reload. And I connect again. So connect device, next, click on BBC microbit and click on connect and done. And then I will, in a moment, sometimes I have to do this more than once. Okay, I'm gonna try that again. Oh, there, connected. It just took a little bit long. Sometimes the first time it does take quite a while, by the way. So I'm going to click on download. And I can see the back of my microbit flashing. So I'm flashing the code onto the microbit. And because I've just disconnected and connected again, it sometimes does take a little bit longer. So I have to wait because I'm going to play music to go with this. So while I'm waiting for it to download onto my microbit, oh, I think I'm on actually now. Well, let's take a look at what you're going to see here. So you can see as I'm talking, or as I'm shaking it rather, you can see the live data. If I hold it still, you can see that it's a flat line. If I swing the microbit, there you go. If I toss the microbit, oops, it's attached to the wire, so it's not perfect. But we can play around with that later when if you're going to try that out with a remote microbit. All right, so let's play some music here and see what happens.
Battery 40%.
Okay, I gotta connect. Usually automatically connects to my phone, but someone turned my Bluetooth off when they were upstairs trying to get our 1-year-old to jump up and down on the bed to music. Okay, I'm connected now. So I'm going to play a song. We're not going to do Hop Little Bunnies. That's what they were playing. We're going to do sing auditions. And let's see how loud they've got my phone. Okay, it's a little loud. I'm going to turn it down. All right, so see if you can, I picked a song that you probably have heard before, but it changes, is actually my son Max's idea. He's 12. So it changes the song all the time throughout. So you'll hear, it's called audition. So you'll hear a different song and see if you can see the difference. I was holding the wrong microbit. There we go. See if you can see the difference between of the vibrations on the graph between each song. So when it changes songs, you'll see a slight difference. I'm going to put this on top of my speaker here. Okay, so I've got my microbit on my speaker. And if you had a really big speaker, you could still have my flashlight on. If you had a really big speaker, you could just put the microbit nearby. And students can experiment with that too, with different, maybe they have different materials that they're going to put on top of the speaker and then the microbit and see if it changes the strength of the vibrations. All right, enough talking. I'm going to play this and see what you notice. Oh, that's way too quiet. So I don't know if you can hear it because I don't have my audio settings. Hold on, let me see if I can change it. Anyway, I'm not sure if you can hear it now. So it's because I'm using a professional microphone. So I know that if I stop sharing, I might be able to change it, but let's see. So if I share again, share sound, let's see. I don't know because it's thinking it's a computer. Okay. All right, so let's try that again. I'll keep playing music. But you get the point.
Come, my lady, come, my lady. You're my butterfly, sugar, baby. Come, my lady, you're my pretty baby. I'll make your legs shake, you make me go. Oh
my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt. Oh my gosh, look at her butt.
Say, yo, Humpty, you're really funny looking. That's all right, cause I get things looking.
All right. You get the point, what's happening there. So if I stop this, I could download the data, open it up in Excel. What time is it? Oh, okay, I've got time here. So I'm going to open it up this in Excel. And then what I would do with the students, and just ignore that other data, we could actually re-download it so that we don't have all that. But I'm just going to download or create a graph of just those first two columns, so the main columns, and it's going to be a giant graph. But what you can do is just stretch out that graph and just you can kind of keep going if you want to. Whoops, it's a little small. Now I lost my graph. There it is. And then you can have the students label which part of the graph represented a different song. So they can do other songs on their speaker. And likewise, they can do the same for, so let's say you're doing human health and body systems. Students could maybe consider putting their microbit on somebody playing a sport. So for example, if they're playing, say, basketball, or if they're playing soccer, maybe they can consider the movements of a defender versus someone playing up, so a forward. You can do the same for other sports as well. You can look at, even they can just like start sprinting from rest. Who's got the biggest acceleration or the fastest acceleration? Who can accelerate the fastest? They can look at all kinds of different data as well. And as I said, you can look at earthquake sensors. You can put it inside of a device, maybe like the egg drop. They can put it inside instead of the egg. They can be dropping the microbit and see whose protective shell protects the microbit or has the least amount of acceleration showing on the microbit on their graph. So many applications there for that one. All right. Okay, so now it's time to connect to our remote microbit. So I'm going to show you one example, but I'll share a couple of other examples as well that you can try out on your own. So this is where we might want to put our microbit not having to have it attached to our computer, but we're able to, put it inside of a shell when we do the egg drop, or like a container when we do the egg drop, or put it outside of the International Space Station, so that we don't have to be out of the space station risking our lives to find out temperature, or to find out other information. So it's collecting data from a remote microbit, and then it's going to send it to a second microbit, which is attached to the computer. If you want to collect data in this way, there's other ways you can connect to two microbits with both of them not being attached to the computer, depending on what the purpose of your application is. So we'll have what I would call the receiver. So the receiver is the one that's going to be attached to the computer. Yes, attached to the computer. I have it backwards on my slides for some reason, so that's what threw me off. So one will be collecting the data, not attached to the computer. Okay, so I've got this is really bugging me. I want to fix my slides. Maybe I will. You can watch me do this. I don't want it to be too confusing when you look at this. So I'll go down to that slide. I want to get it right. So there we go. So I've got my sender collecting the data, and then I've got my receiver. Okay. Funny, I didn't even notice that when I went over this. Okay, so sender will be collecting the data and is not attached to the computer. So that's where you want to use your battery pack, which is currently connected to a pencil, because I was demonstrating if you knock down a pencil, which could be a tree, you can send it a signal to alert that people are cutting trees down. Or then you've got the receiver, which I spelt funny there, but the receiver is attached to your computer. So it's receiving the data, and then it's going to display it for you. Okay, so I'm going to actually do this one live. And as I said, the others I'll just share links to on the document at the end for you to check out. But a couple of things that are important here. So in my sender code, which I'll be demonstrating, I'll actually run the code for this. So do the code for this. You'll notice that when you're on start, the sender microbit, I'm going to make it so that it will say sender. And then I'll also set a channel. So it's set radio group or radio set group. It has to be a number between 0 and 255. And I'm going to choose 99. To send the value to the second microbit, I'm using the radio send block. So for that number, what I usually do when I'm working with a big group is each individual or each small group. So let's usually they'll pair up. So one person will pair up with someone else for their second microbit. I'll just tell them, go write your radio number on the board, so that when people are ready for that part of the code, they just look at the board, and if their number's taken, they just pick a different one, and then they go write their number on the board. So everybody has to write their number on the board, because there's so many numbers between 0 and 255. But I just found that to be the most efficient way, rather than assigning numbers. I just say, okay, write your number on the board, and then that way, otherwise they'll if you have the same number, it will interact and mess with the microbits. So someone could hack and do something with that, but I've never had anyone do that. Also, so you can see that I'm collecting temperature every second. If you're collecting data for long periods of time, just alter that to every 5 minutes, depending on the type of data, as you saw, that you are collecting. Okay, so let's do that, and then we'll start to wrap up. Okay. Okay, so I'll start a new project. So let's say we're going to go outside the International Space Station, and we can't collect data by just going out there all the time, because we'd be risking our lives. We're an astronaut, by the way. So instead, we're going to, on the next time we do a spacewalk, we're going to put a microbit out there to collect information, and then we can just be inside of the comfort of the International Space Station to collect that data. Now, it would make sense to use temperature, but I feel like you won't be able to see the difference in temperature as well in my office here, because I can't change the temperature as fast. So I'm going to do light. Okay, so remember, I'm going to make my code bigger. I'm going to go to on start, and I'm going to use the string block, and I'm going to say sender. Then I'm going to go to radio, and I'm setting my group to 99. Okay, and then I'm going to use the toggle block once again. What I usually do is use my sender, a different toggle signal than my receiver. And I'm going to send radio send number, and the number that I'm going to be sending is going to be light. There we go. So it's going to send that light level I'm going to send it every second. So I'm going to grab my pause block and I'll send that every second. So that's going to be on my microbit right now. So I'm going to download that code. I'm just going to quickly go over it. Okay, looks good. I'm going to download that code onto my microbit. So it's going to be taking in the data and it's going to be sending it to a second microbit, which I'm about to code right now. So I'm going to plug in my battery pack now into the one that I just added the code to. Oops, there we go. And I'm going to attach my other microbit now. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and start a new program. Okay. And I don't need the forever block, so I'll get rid of this. I'm going to set the channel just like I did before to 99. I'll put receiver as well. So when it starts, it will say receiver. So you just know the difference between the two. Under radio, I'm going to on radio received number. So when I receive the number, I'm going to write it to my screen. So every time it receives a number, it will write it to its screen. Remember, it's going to accept a number every second because that's when it's sending the number every second. All right, so I'll do my toggle again, just so that I have that visual. For this one, I'm going to use 4 and 4. So just the 2 microbits will look a little bit different. Then under, whoops, go back. And then under advanced serial, I'm going to serial write the value. And it was light that I did, light level. Here's the part that you have to pay attention to. Right here, you got to click on that receive number and snap that into place. So receive number from here, because that's the number that you're receiving and you're plugging it in. Okay. So I'm going to put that onto my microbit. Oh, I got to do this. Okay. Connect. And there we go. So I'll download that code onto my second microbit, which is the receiver. I'm going to leave it attached to my computer. Okay, it's now collecting data from my microbit that's over here. Okay, so this microbit is now connecting to that one. So a show data device. And let's see. There, so you got the light levels that are being passed from the microbit that's in my hand, that's not attached to my computer, to the microbit that's attached to my computer. So I could bring this microbit now outside. I could put it in the other room. A lot of times people will ask, what's the distance? Well, it kind of depends, I think, on the walls in your school. I remember being in BC once when I had students go outside and walk really, really far to see how long it would work or how far they could go. So that'd be something you can test out with your students. I love doing this with temperature on a really cold day. And you pick which students who would like to go outside and stand in like, minus 40-degree weather while the rest of us are warm inside and they can wave at each other from the window. All right, so I want to make sure we get through everything. So I'm going to go back. You can see the potential again with that. Let's go back to my slides here. So I will share code for the acceleration. So similar to what we did earlier. Again, you can toss the microbit, begin sprinting, shake it near a loudspeaker. I'll share a few examples. So I'm not going to actually do the code for these ones. I'm just going to share some examples and give you the links for them. So this is looking at analyzing code or analyzing data rather with code. All right, so this one is called maximum minimum. What we're doing is collecting, I'll just zoom in a little bit so you can see. So I'm collecting the temperature and I'm checking if the current temperature is less than the previous smallest value. So it keeps checking, and every time the value is less than the last smallest value, it will just replace the variable minimum. So it will, in the end, you will have a variable that's called, when you press button A, it will display the minimum temperature. When you press button B, it will display the maximum temperature. So you don't even have to, in this case, we're not collecting data. We're actually not using the remote, the radio waves, but you could also incorporate that into the application. But I just wanted to mention or show you this so you can give students this code. So I give you the link to the code. You can share it with students. They can change it to the loudest sound or like the loudest or quietest sound. They can do that for light level. They could do that for anything. And the reason I showed you this is that in the Ontario Science and Technology curriculum, it does have it suggests in strand A for grade 8 to have students write code, to look at trends in data, to look at the maximum and minimum values of data. So that's a perfect application for that. You could also, rather than send data, you can have both your microbits attached to a battery and you can send a signal. So when it's suboptimal conditions, so for example, in this case, in my code, you can see when the temperature is less than 0 or greater than 30, it will display a skull on the microbit that is collecting the temperature in the remote location, but it will send an exclamation point to the other microbit, or it will send a period or a dot. So the microbit that's receiving is just going to show the string if it receives. So if it's suboptimal conditions, you'll see the exclamation point. If it's not suboptimal, if it's a good temperature, then it will have just a little dot. And both can be attached to a battery pack because we're not collecting data in that serial, in the live data area, the data logger. Okay. And then finally, this one here calculates the mean. So again, I'll give you the link for that. So it adds up the temperature values or the light level values in this case. It counts how many light level values I've collected. Then when I press button A, you can see that it calculates the mean by taking the sum of all the values divided by the number of values, which I used counter for my variable, and then it shows the mean value. So it calculates that area. Whoops, don't know what I did there. There we go. So you've got the sender code and receiving code. So wrapping up, hopefully you saw some connections to other strands, but for strand A, in grade 4, we looked at producing output. So anything that you display on the microbit or maybe in the form of sound, whenever you use a variable, that's the easiest way to store data. In grade 5, in grade 6, we're obtaining input, which was this entire webinar. So grade 6, we're collecting data. And you saw how we can connect to other strands. In grade 7, what I might do is show students code for collecting temperature, maybe getting minimum and maximum values, and then let them plan out how they'll do that same project or same application, but for sound or for acceleration or for light level. So let them adjust the code and they can plan it out as well. Or maybe you give them the code for the minimum value and they figure out how to calculate the maximum value. Automating large systems in action, again, it's so easy to connect to that strand in grade 8. In fact, they give you a big hint in the STEM strand. So anytime we're automating the collection of data and having the microbit do something in response to that data, that would be considered automating. For those of you who are teaching grade 9, it's the same thing where you're supposed to use coding and investigation. So you're collecting data for the purpose of an investigation and building awareness for emerging tech as well, which we saw with those articles. There's a comparison between math and science. We did use some conditional statements, which are grade 5. I know I'm rushing through this, sorry. This is the last slide before I give you that link. I will mention one more time that amazing connection to grade 8 in mathematics. So you can do a cross-strand approach, which is also part of the strand A, science and technology. It encourages cross-strand, but cross-curricular as well. So that's cross-curricular when we're connecting from science and tech to math, as well as all those other industries that we saw. Okay, so here's the link for you all so that you can access that. I'm just trying to remember if I made that. Yeah, I think I made it so you can view it. Let me know if it's not viewable for you. So bit.ly/remote Floyd, all lowercase. You can check out that link. It has so the screenshots of all of the programs that I shared with you, links to those programs where we're analyzing data through code, where I just kind of showed you the programs, and then also the links to the articles as well. And continue to share the link for you if you just want to click on it in the chat window there as well. So I'd really appreciate if you, so I'll grab that link for you. I'd really appreciate if you could please complete the survey as well. That survey, so that's here at the top of my, sorry, my computer's frozen. There you go. Well, I will get that survey link for you. So that survey is really important for us to know, for me to improve as a facilitator, but also to validate why we're doing sessions like this. So really appreciate if you're able to complete that survey. So I'll pop that in once I can access it. Weird. Oh, I think that Katina has, thank you. Thank you. Did it work or is that let's see. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, weird. For some reason, hopefully you can see the link. For some reason, it's frozen on my computer and I don't know why. Okay, so the link's there for the survey. Really appreciate you completing that. Thank you so much for joining once again, and encourage your colleagues to check out the recorded webinars and also the webinars that are coming up. So next week I have one that is emerging technology. So looking at strand A emerging technologies. Also got one for mathematics. So if you're looking at Scratch and mathematics, I'd love for you to join. And then there's some other ones on there as well on the registration page, which you can find the link for on that Google Doc. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll stay on for a couple minutes. Otherwise, thanks again for joining. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Lauren. Awesome. I'm glad that you found it useful. Thanks, Tanya or Tanya. I should get that correct. And Tressa.
It's Christian. Christian.
Oh, I haven't got down to yours. Hi, Christian. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining again. It's great to see you on here.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Mike. There's a lot to break down. Great to see you, Patty. Thanks for joining, Kathy and Carol. I think some people are jumping off. Thanks, Andrew. Great to see you on here again. Thanks, David.
Great job, Lisa.
Oh, thanks, Katina. Thanks for joining. I don't know how you do it all by jumping on this and on top of everything you're doing.
I like, this is the fun stuff. I get to play a little bit, watch you, see what's going on. It's fun.
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks for pulling that link in. For some reason, my Google Doc was frozen on my screen, so I couldn't get it.
Yeah,
So it's
sometimes
great
that
you're
happens in Zoom. So you just, you know.
Oh, never even noticed it.
Yeah, not a problem.
All
That's
right.
why we work together. But okay, have a great night. Just make sure you press stop on the recording. And,
Oh, yes. Thank you. So I have to do that before I turn it off. Okay. Stop recording.
Yep.